Welcome to the Zain Battla podcast. If you know me, you know I'm a person who loves conversations, whether it's about passions or ideas or current events. If you don't know me personally, then maybe you'll figure out that I'm not really a subject matter expert in anything, but I do consider myself a person who knows a little bit about a lot of things. I want to take you on this journey with me of continuing to learn. In the beginning, I'm going to be bringing guests within my network, and as a Muslim American, a lot of people will be coming from that community. I hope that you continue to join me on this journey, and I want to thank you for listening. Jihad, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I just realized now you can quote me saying Jihad, welcome. So now the YouTube and TikTok algorithms, they're not going to work in my favor, unfortunately.
You're getting shadow banned 100%.
Shadow banned.
You're going to have to put, is there like a watermelon equivalent for Jihad that you could add to the?
Maybe, because the watermelon symbol is kind of the what's the word, scapegoat for the Palestinian flag?
Yeah.
Maybe scapegoat's not the
That's
word.
not the word, but it's okay.
I'm sure with the Jihad, though, there's been instances, stories in your life, as maybe experiencing with non-Muslims in particular, where they said, hey, your name's Jihad, what's going on?
Yeah, it's so funny. So I feel like consistently the problems that I've had were with track coaches, plural. So like the one time in 8th grade, like I was in the hallway, my track coach is also my teacher, both of them. And my friend like called my name down the hallway and he's like, Jihad, and my track coach like slapped him, was like, oh my God, cut that out, don't say that loud. And he came and apologized to me afterwards. But then in high school, my physics teacher was also my track coach, and this guy was just a jerk. I don't know, like I feel like there was a lot of things that we just let slide because my school was like predominantly white, but there was a lot of like very small schools. So it was a public school, but there was only like 90 kids in my graduating class, and maybe 10 of them were Palestinian, right? So percentage-wise, it was like a pretty sizable percentage. But he was just a jerk. And the one time we were like, I don't know, I asked a question in physics class or something, and it was something that he had just said and I wasn't paying attention. And he was like, Esmail. And I was like, I'm just asking a question. And he was like, nah, Esmail, like you're messed up. Your name is Jihad, right? And I'm like, yeah. And he was like, I'm gonna turn the whole Middle East into a parking lot if you ask that question one more time. I was just shocked. Just got away with it because everybody starts cracking up. Even the Palestinian kids in the class are dying. So I was like, what am I supposed to say to this? So yeah, I feel like there are instances in time where people just let loose with whatever it is that they wanted to say. But I think since then it's been pretty chill.
Yeah, I mean, I think the word Jihad definitely post 9/11 more so, and then maybe for 10 to 15 years after, because you're 1998, 1999? 99, yeah. So you were like 2-3 years old when 9/11 even happened. So for the next 10, 15 years, Jihad was, a huge buzzword for, ISIS Jihad, Al-Qaeda Jihad. But when maybe within the past 5 years, it's the hype behind the word Jihad kind of died down.
It's definitely died down. I mean, the last 2 months it's picked up maybe a little bit.
Very true.
But yeah, like I was named after my grandpa. So I don't think my parents would have named me Jihad had I been born 2 years later. But alhamdulillah, I actually love the name, and overall I haven't had as many issues as I think a lot of people assume. But there's just like little microaggressions, we'll call them, that in my childhood existed, I think went away like once I went to college, and post-college now, like in the last year or so, have picked up a little bit more, but it is what it is.
I mean, yeah, if you think about it from a Islamic standpoint, the word Jihad, there's so much beauty behind it. And the way the mainstream media, the non-Muslim media has essentially utilized put such negative undertones behind the word that, when we hear it, we're just like, okay, cool, Jihad, right? But when you realize a non-Muslim, even if they're not white, as long as they're not Muslim and they hear the word Jihad, they may get a little thrown off.
Yeah. And it's like a learning opportunity too. Like at any time there's a lot of people who won't make a joke about it, but they'll just ask. They'll be like, Jihad, like I've known you for a while. Like your name is Jihad. I've only ever heard it in this other context. Like, why is that your name? Like, what does that mean? And that's been like a really cool learning opportunity for them, but also like a forcing function for me to have to learn about like not just what jihad means, but like Islam in general, because I feel like people take that opportunity to ask me questions far more often as a result of that being my name than if I had like, you know, a more generic Arabic name where, you know, that just doesn't come up in conversation as cleanly, right? So alhamdulillah, like I think it's been a really solid like means of learning for me and for others. But that's I would say that's the majority of cases for sure, and the majority of interactions.
I know several people who their name's Muhammad, but they'll shorten it to Mo, or their name's something else Arabic, but they'll shorten it or find a mispronunciation for it to allow the non-Muslims to have a bit more comfort or ability to pronounce the word and not sound super Arab. But with you, it seems like you still go by Jihad. You don't care. I'm sure there was a point where you were using J or using...
I think it's funny because I think it's the opposite. I've always introduced myself as Jihad, and it's my family that will like affectionately call me J, just as like because what other short nickname, like what is the cutesy Arabic version of Jihad? There isn't one, right? So I've always introduced myself like pretty consistently as Jihad, and I think as a result, people have been forced to like either just completely ignore it and just say, okay, we're gonna move, or like ask directly like, why is that your name? If it's something that is like they do not understand or is bugging them. But like you said, like Muhammad, you could argue has the same Islamic connotation, if not more so, but it's such a common name relatively that I feel like people aren't going to ask, right? And you could, like you said, shorten it to Mo, shorten it to this, whatever it might be. So yeah, it has been my own jihad, I guess, struggling with that. But no, alhamdulillah, it's been really nice. I wrote my college essay, to get into college about my name. That was really? I milked that so hard. It was like a mix of like my name and SpongeBob. It's fantastic.
SpongeBob?
Yeah.
What do you mean you mix SpongeBob in there?
You remember that SpongeBob episode where like all the guys, you know SpongeBob, right?
We didn't have cable growing up, but we did rent Nickelodeon SpongeBob on DVD. So I've seen a good amount of episodes, but maybe the viewers will understand.
There's this one SpongeBob episode. I forget the context, but there's a scene where like there's a bunch of little SpongeBobs running around in his head. It's the fine dining and breathing episode, where he like can't remember anything except for fine dining and breathing, and he forgets his own name. And then all the little SpongeBobs are running around in his head, trying to figure out his name.
It was the one, empty your mind.
Yes.
I remember that one.
So I somehow tied that scene in with a discussion of the meaning of jihad, and it got me into school.
So you basically said in the essay, empty your mind on the word jihad.
On like the implicit bias that comes with,
Yeah, that
was a banger. I'm not gonna
lie. Mean, I didn't even read it, and the concept, the way you tied it in, it already sounds like a banger. What did you do in college?
Economics.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I went in thinking I was going to do a bunch of things, right? Like I thought I was going to go to law school. I like took the LSAT and went through that whole thing. I thought I was going to get my PhD at one point. But I think it's one of those things where like you realize you see something as a hobby and you never see it as like, oh, this could actually be my job. And I feel like growing up, I was like very tech interested, but I was always just playing with it. I never said like, oh, I wanted to be an engineer. Oh, I wanted to work in tech, or I wanted to be a CEO or whatever it may be. I was just saying like, this is cool. This is something that I do on the side. Like I taught myself how to code. I was building websites. I was doing whatever. And then I got to college and there was a bunch of like student orgs related to that stuff. And I joined them all. And I was like, this is my fun on the side, but my classwork is going to be, economics. And then by my junior year, I realized like there's absolutely no reason that I should be differentiating these things, especially considering that it's not like the hobby that I had was, I don't know, jump rope. Like I could make a legitimate career out of this like very easily, and it was in a very straightforward manner. So that's sort of there was a lot of winding pathways, but that was sort of the path that I took.
Some may argue you could make a career out of jump roping. Just ask Corbin Blue.
Keep your head in the game.
Keep your head in the game, bro. No, that's High School Musical. His was push it.
Oh yeah. Oh man.
So he made a career out of that. So, but it's good that you were able to, major in economics, learn. I don't know if you look back and think that, oh, cool, I learned so much about economics. Because when it comes to economics, so much of it is very theoretical.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, the Laffer's theory or, different economic theories. But it's just because everything is so theoretical, it's hard to apply it to a corporate job, for example, which is
100%.
what most people go for after undergrad, or even if you're trying to become, a doctor, lawyer, anything else after that. It's like, unless you're going to become an economist, you're economist.
Economist.
Yeah. It sounded right in my head. Unless that's what you're gonna become. The economics degree. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yes, it's useless. You don't need to know the name of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, but I think so. At Northwestern, at least, we didn't have an undergraduate business program. So anybody that was doing anything business adjacent was either exploring something totally different and just, I'm going to do art history and I'm going to apply for consulting jobs, or they were doing economics if they wanted it to be like somewhat relevant, right? So it was the biggest major at the university because it was sort of this catch-all for people that wanted to do anything business related. And I think, like I said, those like clubs that I was joining. So there's this one program that I got involved with like freshman year called Launch, and it was basically an undergraduates run startup incubator. So it was like run by undergrads, and then you would apply to the program, and you and like your team would have to start a startup and pitch it by the end of the quarter, and like show your traction and show like there were investors there that weren't investing, but they were judging. It was like Shark Tank style.
Oh, wow.
It was like really cool. And most of the ideas and that people came up with were booty. Like like every year, I ran it my sophomore year, and every year somebody would come and say like, oh, we're gonna start like a late night restaurant on campus, like every single time, right? And it would fail every single time. But it was just an opportunity for people to like come in and say, okay, I'm not learning how to run or start a business in the classroom, so let's get hands-on experience. And then our job as the people running the club, we're like, how do we put together a curriculum to like facilitate that learning, right? So we're not going to teach you maybe how to like financially model your business, right? But we will teach you like, okay, how do you iterate on your idea? How do you talk to customers so that you don't bias them, but you're able to get like legitimate feedback from them? How do you think about like building and growing a team, right? And it's so funny because in hindsight, like I didn't know any of these things, right? So I was going and like learning from other people, and I had the same experience as all these other students. And then the next year I would run it back and like teach what I do. But it was a really cool experience in that regard, and I think led to a lot of what I ended up doing that I wasn't going to learn in the classroom.
It seems that most of the skills that people need for business or for startups or just coming up with some sort of business idea, a lot of it just has to go with just doing it and figuring it out, because a classroom can only teach you so much, and until you actually apply those skills or develop those skills by actually doing it, you're eventually not going to pick it up, essentially, just learning concepts. And I think another thing that I've always thought about is there a limit or a barrier to the maximum amount of innovation, right? Or are we plateauing in innovation? And the reason I bring that up, right, is because you think about all the innovations within the beginning of the information age, essentially, right? That how much the internet has exploded. The internet is in your pocket now, and you're able to take high resolution photos, the same quality of a DSLR, essentially, through your phone. What's next, essentially, for technology? Because, and even if what is next for technology is AI, for example, which that's what all the directions are pointing to, it almost makes me wonder, like, at what point is technology essentially going to plateau, if that makes sense?
I mean, I think in a lot of ways it already has. This is a really interesting question, because I think you could look at it from two angles, right? So on one hand, you have like these technological leaps, right? So you have the internet, that started in like the 80s and 90s, got commercialized throughout the 90s. Social media popped in like the early 2000s. And now it's like the technology isn't changing. It's just more and more methods of commercialization to solve like very specific and more specific problems for various markets, right? And I think we see that with basically every technological leap. We're seeing that now with AI, where 10 years ago, like we had a lot of very solid, like broad AI tech, but it wasn't commercialized. And only in the last like 2 years have we seen ChatGPT, and now you see like tons of use cases popping up for very specific niches, all using the same underlying technology. And that's not to say that there isn't like a very long way to go on like the AI front as well, right? But it sort of follows the same pattern where there's the leap, the step, and then there's this iteration that happens over the course of many years. And I feel like that iterative process is happening faster and faster and faster now. So once the leap happens, you're basically commercializing that tech within 5 years because of the scale at which you're able to distribute any new development or any new business that you have worldwide. I think what's really interesting now is that people are seeing this new technology and realizing that even though we're able to iterate at the scale or at scales that like we were never able to iterate at before and like distribute this technology to more and more people at a speed that we weren't able to before, the problems that they're solving are not fundamental to survival as humans, right? Like electricity was a very different technological leap than AI, right? Like we could all live without AI. Even if it's making our lives like significantly easier right now, it's really just like introducing more leisure and removing like more necessity for work. But with like electricity, for example, you could argue that people were obviously living before electricity, but it is leaps and bounds creating like more of a, what is the word I'm looking for? Like a wedge in our lives in the necessity that it brings, right? So I think that's really this like question of like, is technology accelerating or is progress still being made? Yes, progress is still being made, but we've reached this plateau of like necessity. If all technological development stopped tomorrow, obviously that would have downstream effects on the economy and things would get really bad. But like in theory, everybody would be fine, right? Like we have enough here to like live very happy lives and lifespans and healthcare and all those things pretty easy.
Right, because right now the most commercialized form of technology is phones, iPhone, Android, whatever the phone is. And it seems that each year the iPhone comes out. In the beginning of the iPhone, there were so many revolutionary additions. You had Siri, you had Touch ID, you had Face ID, you had all these, wow, this is crazy innovation. And then now it seems like every year it's better battery, better camera, Papa John's. Like it's just that's it. That's all they got. So it almost makes me wonder that, okay, maybe the phone has reached its limitation or is slowly reaching that limit. And then that's maybe why Apple and all these other companies are moving more towards AI or moving more towards virtual and augmented reality. And that's why there's this huge push on why Apple's pouring so much money into this Vision Pro, hoping that it succeeds.
And I think there's a big question there is like, so there's this philosophy in Silicon Valley that's become popularized called like effective accelerationism or accelerationism. Basically the argument that like any technological progress is good progress. And like, even if some of the things that we end up building are bad, we should just like progress as quickly as possible. And on net, that will benefit humanity, right? And I personally disagree with that because we are now at a point where maybe 200 years ago, that philosophy like was effective. But now because of the nature of the technology that we're building, it is not just like assumed that all technological progress is good, right?
Right. Like they're just doing it for shits and giggles now.
They're just doing it for shits and giggles. And they're doing it because like the business models of like the financiers in America rely on that, right? Like you need the new paradigm to come in so all the VCs can spill money into it and like they can get their fees and like the cycle continues, right? And that's why every year you seem to see like a new like thesis that like is buzzing that year and all these companies pop up and 99% of them all end up failing. Like it's because the venture capital community and the investment community more broadly needs a new narrative to invest in, or else their business models don't make sense, right? So I think we're now at this point where we need to think a little bit more critically about like, okay, what is it that we should be building and why? A really good example of this is, I think the guy's name is Brian Johnson, but he's this like tech billionaire that has now dedicated his entire life to
The
like
longevity guy?
guy.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes.
But like, it's weird, right? Like the guy's doing everything from putting like scans on his penis to like, you know, trying to figure out what the best combination of food every day is to eat. Like he's no longer living a life for the sake of happiness or like goodness. He's living a life just to see how long he can make it last, right? And you could argue that he's making the sacrifice so that like a lot of these discoveries can be commercialized so that you and I could live longer. Right. And then the question is like, if the average American lifespan is 75 years, you know, maybe we want to bump it up to 80 or 85 or even 90. But like, should our goal be 200 years of living? Like, maybe not, right?
I think it just depends on, is your quality of life still going to be good at that point? Because there's some people who, even in their 60s, their health just deteriorates and dwindles so much that I don't want to say it's like, what's the point of living? But it's just, there's people who are in their 70s and 80s who their health outcomes are just way better than people in their 60s and 50s because they've had the proper nourishment, they've had the proper exercise, they've done all the things right in order to, you know, not just have longevity of life, but longevity of the quality. But my issue with Brian Johnson is I saw his routine. One day I just stumbled upon his video. I think he's like a co-founder of Venmo or a co-founder
something like that. Some Venmo adjacent company.
Yeah. So I saw his routine and he just wakes up at 4 or 5 in the morning every day. And that's already a no for me, right? And then he shines this light on his face for 30 minutes. And then he has like 40 pills in the morning that all have different vitamins. And I'm just like, bro, at what point do you argue that, hey, maybe my actual health or my standard of quality of life in terms of health is better, but are you actually enjoying your life? Maybe you have the energy and maybe you have the ability to, I guess maybe you're 80 years old and still able to run like a 50-year-old. But at that point, it's like, if you're sacrificing so much of what there is in life in terms of, you know, just eating a simple meal that you enjoy. Maybe he enjoys it, who knows? Right. But for me, I see his diet and I'm like, bro, come on.
Yeah.
This can't be it. Yeah, this can't be it. But for him, it seems like he's dedicated to it.
Yeah. I think, again, like he's making the argument that he's, you know, toughened through it because each of these discoveries could then be, you know, productized, and then you won't have to go through all of the struggles that he's going through to figure out what the ideal, you know, combination of supplements and food and protocols is for the day. You could just do what he discovered was best, right? I still would argue that's unnecessary to the 10th degree.
He's dying for all our sins.
Yeah, he's Brian Jesus.
Basically.
But yeah, I think there is this really weird push towards just like, we should progress everything. And there are very few people that are sitting down and saying like, why are we doing this, right? And again, there's a different question of, so you see like what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, but there's like a smaller version of this happening in AI right now, right? Where you have like the AI accelerationists who are just like, we need to reach artificial general intelligence as quickly as possible. We don't care if it's going to end the world. Like, we just need to like get there, right? And then there's some people that are like the AI safety people that are like, whoa, slow down. We shouldn't even be writing one more line of code until, you know, we figure out what is going on here. And then there's a lot of gradients in the middle, right? And I don't think we should all be, you know, AI safety doomers who are like, we shouldn't do anything until we figure out exactly what's going on. But we probably shouldn't be on the complete opposite end of the spectrum either. And there's very little, you know, moderate discussion as to what is the best way that we can continue to move forward while still doing so intelligently. And I think the incentives just aren't lined up for anybody to be thinking that way.
I honestly feel like we're getting to a point where we're slowly trying to progress AI more and more and seeing what its capabilities are without a focus on what limits we should put on it. Because once we get to a point where we develop an AI that has emotions, human type emotions, or has intelligence that exceeds our own intelligence, that's when the real issues start. And it slowly seems like every post-apocalyptic movie or Black Mirror episode, it's slowly becoming a reality, which is very scary.
Yeah. There's two threads I kind of want to pull on here, because I think like AI is just a good case study for this broader conversation that we're having around tech progress, but it's not like the only area where like this is an issue, right? But on one hand, you have in AI, you have this like differentiation between intelligence and consciousness, and I think what people are realizing now is that, you know, something like ChatGPT, it's obviously very intelligent. You can make the argument that it's more intelligent than a lot of humans already, right?
Wow.
But it is not conscious, right? Like it doesn't have emotions. It doesn't like, it is quite literally a computer that is just jumbling words and then spitting out an answer, right? And that has a lot of impact now on the way that, you know, psychologists and neuroscientists are like examining the brain to say like, okay, if that's the way that AI works, like an LLM works, and that is the output that we're getting,
LLM?
large language model, which is
Okay.
like what ChatGPT and that's the technology it's built on. We're making the assumption that's not the way the brain works. So there must be something else that the brain is doing, right? So on one hand, you're seeing that conversation inform, you know, other fields of study to the point where some people are saying we're never going to reach artificial general intelligence. This has actually just opened our eyes to the fact that there is like this differentiation and we should be exploring consciousness more and less intelligence, right? On the other hand, though,
There's always on the other hand.
there's always on the other hand. We start getting into these questions of like, okay, if intelligence can be, you know, if a computer can be more intelligent than a human, what does that mean for us, right? And there was this really interesting conversation that I had. So a friend of mine, Fardim, built this app called Hadith GPT.
I've heard of it. I've heard of it. Yeah.
And it was like you could ask it any question and it would cite like the Quran and Hadith to like answer the question for you from an Islamic perspective, right? And it went viral on Twitter, and like hella people were asking the same questions, like, you know, is it halal to have a girlfriend outside of the context of marriage? But this one like sheikh who knew Fardim like hit him up and was like, yo, you should like take this down. Not even, you know, there's a question of like, it might be giving wrong answers, and, you know, that's your responsibility as the person who built the tool. But also, like, Islamically, we have this tradition of learning from humans, right? And like learning from other Muslims specifically. So how do we reconcile the tools that are now available to us with this like tradition of like human to human learning and education? Like there's these really, really big questions that I think we're completely ignoring by just saying, okay, we're going to continue to build until we reach AGI, right? Because then we get there and we're like, wait a second, like all of this progress was made and we have absolutely no idea how to grapple with any of this from a personal, from a societal, and from a spiritual level, right? So I think that all comes back to the initial conversation of like, progress is being made, but to what end? And I think we're at this point now where like more thought needs to be given.
You've brought Islam into the conversation, and there's a restaurant that I went to in Bridgeview area, and I kid you not, they have a VR headset, one of those VR, not just a headset, but the chair, and it adds the when you're traveling, it adds the effects of you moving. And I thought, I wonder what this VR headset is going to, what the experience is going to be.
Yeah.
I kid you not, it was a tour of Al-Haram. So you could perform Umrah and Hajj.
That's crazy.
Essentially on VR. You could visit Medina, the Prophet's mosque. And this is the third one. You can go on Isra and Miraj on VR. So it's like, okay, there's clearly someone out there, probably with good intention, that, hey, I'm going to implement AI with Islam, building this Hadith GPT. Or going on Isra and Miraj in VR. Maybe it's good intention. I didn't do it, so I don't know what's in it, nor can I validate whether it was Islamically accurate or not if I actually did it. But it was just still kind of mind-blowing to me that, wow, we've come to a point where maybe people won't even go to Hajj anymore. I mean, I hope people still do, but they just put on a VR headset and then they're like, you know what? I already did Hajj, or even just travel in general. Islam aside, like maybe they want to see the Eiffel Tower. Just put on a VR headset. All right, I saw the Eiffel Tower. I experienced it. And as VR becomes more and more real, and it seems more real, maybe people will just stay in their home, stay in a little pod the whole time. Have you seen WALL-E?
I have seen WALL-E.
Yeah, it's just like everybody's just going to be
WALL-E. Yeah.
living on WALL-E. Everybody's just sitting on a little chair in space because the Earth is uninhabitable, and you just got these headsets on.
It's so interesting because I think everybody would agree that like we shouldn't be in that world, right? But every technological development that we've discussed today sort of nudges us closer to that world, right? Which brings us to the question of like, why aren't people like more intentionally thinking about the way that these technologies like evolve? But it also brings us to the question of like, okay, going back to the question of like Islam, right? And like this is true for every religion, no matter what, no matter what your belief system is, you have to evaluate the things that you're using and the work that you're doing based off of that belief system, right? And in the case of Islam, it's like, how do we grapple with like not being Luddites and saying like we don't want anything to do with all this newfangled technology that is coming up, with also being like very intentional about like what is an Islamic perspective on X that is going to lead us to be, responsible and productive with the technology that we're developing, but actually like leave some progress on the table because we don't think that we should be going in that direction. And again, like it doesn't need to just be like an Islamic conversation. I think everybody should be asking that question. But yeah, like there's this understanding that like certain science fiction, futures are going to come into fruition if we continue going down this path. And I don't think enough people are talking about that. A really good example of this is like with like generative AI, like you can now create like a picture of anything, right? Or you can write an essay like really, really quickly, right? So there's like an abundance of media. You could argue infinite information and infinite media out there today. Does that make, handcrafted, human-crafted, real media more valuable? And if so, do we actually go into a world where more and more people are going to like not want to be in VR, want to be outside, only like consume things that are handcrafted, like verifiably human?
Right.
And if all of that is true, like maybe that is our response to have like a more responsible future of like progress with these technologies. I'm just very, I don't think I see that trend happening yet, right? As much as I would like that to be the case.
There are those small minor movements of people that are going back to flip phones, or they're setting screen limits on certain applications or deleting social media. So I am starting to see some of that, and there are benefits of people, not being on their phone all day. But it seems like the trend is not heading in that direction. There may be a small minority of people who are actually getting away from technology or putting limits on it, but the vast majority of people are just obsessed with TikTok, scrolling 10 seconds, going through which video they can find. And it also seems like that within technology, the three areas of advancements that I'm at least seeing are always focused on these three things. It's either within AI, it's within VR/AR, or it's in the crypto and Web3 world. So are all three of those areas mutually exclusive in their advancement, or do they kind of have a little bit of crossover?
I think the reason that you see advancement happening in all three is because they all depend on one another, right? So a really good example is going back to what we were just discussing around like, a world of infinite media. There's more value placed on things that are like created by humans. How do you differentiate between something that was made by an AI and something that is like verifiably human? Well, like in a digital world, you need crypto to do that, right?
Yeah.
because there's no other way to have like a public ledger or a public mutual understanding of, hey, Zain made this image or Zain published this podcast and he's signing off for everybody to see that it was not made by an AI, it was made by him, right? With like VR and AR and like spatial technology, it's like, okay, now you're outside of the confines of any like one corporation or website or database. So you need to better understand like the objects that I'm interacting with in this like virtual world, like where do they come from? Who are they owned by? Like how are they manifested? And again, like in that world, you need crypto for that because you can't have like Meta and Apple owning all of that data. Because then none of these platforms are going to be like interoperable. In order to reach like the future that we expect to reach, you need to have like an open database of ownership that is verifiable by everybody that is using it, right? And then on the AI side, you can make the argument that like, okay, well, in a spatial world where we have a lot of VR and AR, you need things to be like very dynamic and constantly like changing.
Yeah.
And so you would need AI on that end, right? So all of these technologies are like interlocked and like interdependent in a way. And I think the problem that I saw with like crypto and Web3 is that a lot of enthusiasts were saying like, you know, crypto is the future, right? And I mean, like, you could argue that part of that is true, but it is the future because of its use cases in like these other two fields. And like AI is the future because of its use cases alongside these other two developments and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it seems like with crypto, it's all dependent on faith because with our currency, the US currency, fiat, it's not really backed by anything anymore. At one point, it was backed by the gold standard, right? But now as people are losing faith in, US currency or just currency in general, it seems that that's why people are gravitating more towards crypto, and they want that decentralization of getting rid of these financial institutions controlling their money and don't want dependency on that.
But I just want to stop because like I think that's the big misunderstanding with crypto. Like when I tell people that I work in crypto or work with crypto, people assume like, oh, you're investing, right?
Right.
And that couldn't be further from the truth, right? So I think there is the world of cryptocurrencies, which was like the first iteration, the first developments of like a blockchain as a technology to say like, hey, we can create a money system that is not dependent on any one bank, right? That is like a legitimate use case that I think works very well in the world of like Bitcoin, in the world of like, you know, Ethereum has USDC, which is like this token that is pegged to the US dollar. So I don't need to go through a Western Union or a Chase in order to like transfer money to my family in Palestine. I could just do that instantaneously. That said, though, that was like iteration number one. And there was all this like scam technology that popped up around it, SafeMoon, you know, like
don't tell me about, don't bring up SafeMoon around
all these tokens that people are investing and still continue to invest in. That's basically just straight gambling. It's based off faith. There's nothing there, right? But then that technology was used for, okay, in order to create a money system, we needed to create a way that like people could verifiably understand that I have value and I'm sending that to you. And I'm like subtracting 1 Bitcoin and adding 1 Bitcoin to, you know, Zain's account, and everybody can see that. And we don't need a middleman to verify that, right? That technology that we call a blockchain is like also useful for all property rights across all of the internet, right? So I have any sort of data. I have an account, let's just say, on Facebook. I want my Facebook account and all of the data associated with it to come with me when I log into, you know, Twitter. And my entire, you know, social network and graph and my follower count and all of that, I want all of that data to move with me in a verifiable way without Facebook owning that data, right? With crypto, that's possible. But I think people, you hear that word, they immediately think like, oh, we're investing in currencies.
Right.
But when we say like, oh, crypto and AI and spatial tech are like all of these things are dependent on one another. Spatial tech is not dependent on me being able to invest in SafeMoon. It's dependent on like that underlying technology that makes it possible to verify like data and transactions on the internet that could then be used in these other worlds that are no longer like owned by any one corporation.
And I think that's why within the crypto world, the word crypto, I feel has, you know, not been used as often as now Web3.
Yeah.
And I think it's to differentiate from the fact that oh, and me being someone who just understands crypto on a very high level, or a very average level of understanding crypto, it's like, okay, back in 2021 or back in 2018, 2019, when those spikes in Bitcoin and all these other, other coins, when those spikes started happening, we started paying attention to it and saying, oh, this is a good way to make money. But what we don't realize is, oh, there's a very legitimate technology, a use case for this technology, that there's this universal ledger that everybody on the internet or everybody that is participating in this ledger recognizes that, hey, once this transaction happens, it's written in history on this ledger that anybody can access. And we're all consistently together verifying that this transaction happened. Where that becomes a little skeptical in certain cases is, such as with FTX, is what is the legitimacy of that ledger? How does everybody agree that, just because you put a ledger on a website or on, I don't even know how you access the ledger. I just knew on my Coinbase app, okay, I sell, buy and sell. But how do we verify that if some new coin comes out that it's legit, or some new wallet that it's legit?
And this is the big thing, right? Like so the FTXs, the Binances, the Coinbases of the world are centralized exchanges, right? They're places where I can give US dollars and receive crypto in return, but they are actually not, outside of the fact that like I am receiving crypto, they are not fully built on a blockchain, right? So all of those benefits of using crypto, you don't get by using a centralized exchange. You get by buying on a centralized exchange and then taking those tokens out and putting them into my own wallet that I have custody of, right? And I don't want to get into like the details of that, but my point is that like with something like FTX,
wait, do get into the details. So you're telling me the money in my Coinbase right now is not actually mine?
No.
Wow.
Not your there's a phrase. It's not your keys, not your coins. So like if you don't have the keys to your wallet and your tokens are not in that wallet, that's Coinbase owns that and basically is just giving you an IOU.
So I do have a Coinbase wallet.
Yeah.
So
Coinbase
I own that.
Anything
right?
in your Coinbase wallet, you own they have no ability to seize.
So I'm good.
You're good. You're chilling. You're chilling. But FTX did not have an FTX wallet. Right? FTX, everything was owned by the company. It was on their balance sheet, right? And when I went and bought Bitcoin on FTX, they were just giving me an IOU to say like, hey, when you sell it, we'll sell it at this new price based off of what you bought it at. But FTX still owned everything, right? And what FTX was doing is like, you were giving them money to buy Bitcoin. They were taking that money and then investing it on your behalf on the back end, and you didn't know that at all. They lost all the money that people had put into their, their platform. And then when people went to sell, there was nothing to give them.
Because they were, the catch that they hooked everybody on FTX was those super high interest rates, right?
Exactly. So in that world, right, it is, crypto in that people were buying and selling tokens, but it's not crypto in that people are using the underlying blockchain technology and like all of its benefits, right? And that's why people started saying, oh, Web3, like you said, to like differentiate these worlds, but there's still like massive confusion.
Right.
And I think to that point, like any further adoption, like what my company does, what others are doing, is going to have like crypto rails that are sort of abstracted away, so people get the benefits of what is happening, and on a high level, what I'm like explaining to be the benefits, they're able to reap those. But you don't know like that it's on Ethereum. You don't know that it's using a blockchain. You don't know that you have a wallet associated with your email account. Like everything is sort of abstracted away. Otherwise, people are just going to assume that like, oh, it's crypto, it's a scam, it's SafeMoon, right? Those are two like very different things.
Yeah. Well, I do think that when it comes to the average person, unless you take them through a long walkthrough within Web3 or blockchain in general, they're gonna have a very limited understanding, and they're just gonna think about, oh yeah, this is just a way for me to invest my money. And even same thing you could say about the stock market. Do majority of people actually know how the stock market works, how the price changes? Right. So it's like we're just investing our money in blind faith and trying to make up a way that, oh yeah, I'm very bullish about this investment that I'm making,
Mhm.
but you don't understand on the back end what's actually happening. And that's where issues like FTX, I don't know if you heard this story about the OneCoin.
No, I didn't hear about
You didn't hear
OneCoin.
about OneCoin? So with OneCoin,
Did you make it?
I did not make
You
it.
rugged everybody?
No, it wasn't me. It was
Okay.
this lady, I forgot her name, but she's either from Bulgaria or in Bulgaria.
Nice.
But she was essentially given the name the crypto queen.
Okay.
Like people were online were calling her that. Unfortunately, so her and another business partner released a coin called OneCoin, and they were basically trying everybody to buy into the OneCoin. And I don't know how she guaranteed the ability for people to buy in, but the shady thing is there was no blockchain. She was just saying, "Hey, buy the OneCoin, and it's a good investment. We're gonna beat Bitcoin. We're gonna do great, right?"
Mm-hmm.
And what it ended up being was the price of the OneCoin was determined. Basically, she would just go in and change the price.
That's crazy.
herself. So I don't know what the actual price was at its peak or anything, right?
Yeah.
But she would literally go on the back end, change the price of OneCoin herself. And in order to either earn more OneCoin or maximize your investment, you have to invite other people to invest into OneCoin. So what ended up happening is eventually she got caught. About $4 billion were invested.
Wow.
Her partner just got indicted for 20 years in prison, but she's still at large. She's on the FBI top 10 most wanted.
That's crazy.
It's a crazy story, and essentially it was like a multi-level marketing scheme because it's like, hey, recruit someone to invest in this, but there was just no legitimacy behind the actual coin. People weren't actually investing in anything. It was just her pooling the money, telling people that their investments were growing, and it's like stories like that, stories like FTX, where there's continuous people trying to pour in their money or investment or time and technological development into the crypto space, and it's almost like, oh, a lot of it is just very hopeful thinking. And this could be with crypto. This could even be with VR. Like, obviously, there's no physical Apple Vision Pro in my hand right now, so I can't validate whether it's worth $3,500. But a lot of people probably already are gonna buy it.
Right.
Or even with AI, a lot of VCs are pouring money into AI, not knowing at what extent can it get to, or are these companies that people are saying, hey, we're an AI startup, pour money into it, and then it ends up failing? Is it all just a big gamble? And is that why VCs and individuals are going into it?
I mean, just to answer that last question, like, I think the business model of VC is built so that, like, VC is just like legitimized gambling for markets, right? Like, I'm saying I'm going to raise $500 million for my VC fund from all of these other rich people who trust me to invest their money. I'm going to invest it into 100 companies. I really only need 3 of them to hit in order to, make my fund back, but I need 3 of them to hit big, right? Like, I need all of those to be like $1 billion or $10 billion companies, and then the other 97 that I invested in can go to 0. I literally don't care, right?
Yeah.
That is like the model that VCs are working with, and as a result, every technology that they invest in needs to be like this absolute life-changing, like, oh my God, AI is going to absolutely take over the world. Because if that doesn't happen, they are not going to return their fund, right? Like, if every VC doesn't have at least one Uber or one Airbnb or one whatever, they don't make their money back, right? So you end up seeing like a lot of these hype cycles where people are getting really, really excited about a particular technology. And I'm still very like, because I'm working with it on a day-to-day basis and my company is making money as a result of it, right? Without investing, that's, crypto has like legitimacy as a technology, that AI has legitimacy as a technology, that spatial has legitimacy. But there's definitely like a massive gap, some more than others, between like what people think that level of legitimacy is with like what is actually happening. And I think a lot of that is because of the incentives for VCs to like build that hype cycle so that they could raise more money, so they can collect fees, so they can invest more. And even if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter because they still made their money.
So the only thing more valuable than the dollar is hype.
Is hype.
Is what I'm hearing.
Is vibes.
Because hype and vibes determines the price.
It does. And that's not just true with crypto, right? That's true with stocks. Yeah. Exactly, right? Like we saw that with the whole Wall Street bets thing. We see that with companies, like private companies today. Like VC rounds will get super, super inflated. You'll see a company with no product raise at $100 million valuation because, oh, well, if Zain's investing in it, then I have to invest in it and I'm going to one up them. And it went viral on Twitter, so there must be something here and blah, blah, blah. I think a lot of our market is just built on hype and vibes more than we would like to believe. And it's just the level of privacy and openness with which we have like access to that information.
It does seem that within crypto or within technology in general, you're pretty involved in it day to day. What kind of things are you working on right now that you would want to shed some light on?
Yeah, so I think a lot of what I'm working on is like related to these topics that we're discussing, right? So I used to, a few years ago, a buddy and I started, we'll call like a creator growth agency. So we worked with big YouTubers between like 500,000 and 10 million subscribers. And we realized that they have a bunch of data on the back end that they just weren't looking at, right? Either because they didn't have the time or they didn't really have the chops to understand how to make that data work for them, right? So we would go in and give them a better understanding of like how they should be titling their videos, what should their thumbnail look like how quickly should they be talking, and like what should the structure of their video actually be? How should they edit it? Like what should their content calendar look like? If I'm gonna post like a vlog on one day, should I post, an action video, later that week? We basically developed like 15 different analyses, each answering different questions like that. And then we would put together like a whole content strategy for that creator. It worked once, like it didn't work for brand new creators because really when you're fresh, you need to have a better understanding of like, what does my audience want to see and like build that initial audience. But for these guys that already had an audience and it was really like a matter of optimizing, we were able to make them tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars more a year. Just off on YouTube, right? We weren't touching any other platform. So that was really, really cool. We worked with like a few dozen creators in that range. And we saw like the problems firsthand of these guys were only making money, if they continued to pump out content and get the algorithm to like them.
Right.
But they were making a lot of money if they did it right. But they were really, really burned out. And also like the platforms that they were posting on had complete control over like the type of content that they were putting out, right? So like it was our job to basically read the algorithm and say like, hey, Zain, never interview Jihad again. Like he did not do well on the podcast. You should get more, lawyers on your podcast, right? Those guys, that's like a very simplistic observation. So they were basically slaves to the algorithm, and whatever YouTube said they wanted to see, we would tell them this is what you need to do. And if YouTube decided, hey, like we're going to change the algorithm and like their videos started to fall out of favor, they were just screwed, right? There was nothing that they could really do. They would have to start whole new accounts. Like their entire businesses would just burn to the ground essentially. Wow. And like when the platforms have that much control, we have like all of these conversations around, the creator economy. People are now able to have like more independence about what they publish and make money off of it, off of their passions. But like that wasn't true given the power that the platforms held over what folks were posting. And it's not just YouTube, that's Instagram, that's Twitter, that's everywhere, right?
Yeah, I hear algorithms kind of the buzzword for in the creator space.
Right. So around the time that we were wrapping that company up and it eventually got acquired, like I was sort of exploring this idea of like, how do we solve these problems in the creator economy so that like creators could have like true independence, that like when I'm publishing a video, I have full rights to that video, that I'm able to monetize it in a lot of different ways, not just through like the ads that YouTube wants to show on it. And YouTube's like one of the best platforms to that, by the way, right? Like Instagram, Twitter, you can't monetize at all unless you're selling a product and, driving traffic towards that. But there's no like creator fund on Twitter or Instagram that is paying creators in that way. So those were questions that I was exploring. And then around that time, I discovered this thing called NBA Top Shot.
Oh, yeah.
So there was basically just like these digital trading cards that I later learned were NFTs.
Yeah.
Of like NBA plays, like not just players, but like moments, right? So it was like, oh,
Right.
LeBron James dunk on this day. But if it was like a rookie, there's like a certain amount of them that were available.
I bought a few.
Yeah.
And what I did was I bought like a pack,
Mhm.
an unopened pack for like $200. And then on eBay, you could sell unopened packs for like $1,000, $1,500. So I sold a couple packs and I made some good money off of it. But then it got to a point where Top Shot started realizing that people were doing that.
Mhm.
So they put all these limitations and
yeah.
restrictions and trying to find ways that, oh, you can't transfer a pack to someone else unless you know, the packs have been opened, or unless I mean, people found ways to work around it.
Yeah.
But you know, they're gonna crack down and try to maximize as much as they can. But sorry, I'm glad I have the familiarity with the Top Shot a little bit.
I'm glad you do. Like that opens up the conversation a little bit. But I was playing with that for a while, and then I was like, what is this? Like, what is it that I'm playing with here? And I started learning more about like NFTs and tokens and all of this stuff. And I was like, this is pretty interesting, at least, if nothing else. And at the time we were working with some basketball YouTubers, and I was like, yo, like I talked to the community manager over at Top Shot. He's willing to like sponsor your video for $10,000 and give you 5 packs if you do like a pack opening on your like channel, right? And I was like, I thought it would be a cool opportunity. I'm giving this guy some money, like whatever. Yeah. And he was like, I don't know what you're talking about. This sounds like a scam. I want absolutely nothing to do with this. So I was like, understandable. But I kept going down the rabbit hole myself. And I think what I realized is like a lot of the problems that the creators that we were working with had were being answered not immediately, but potentially by this technology that NBA Top Shot was built on, right? Like if I make my YouTube video an NFT, I now have a built-in monetization method, regardless of what YouTube or Twitter or anybody has to say about it. I have a direct communication with my collectors, right? So if you collect my video, I now have access to like that connection between you outside of the confines of a YouTube or a Twitter, right? Like if YouTube shuts down, I lose all of my subscribers, but the blockchain is never going to shut down, right? So that data is now publicly available. And then it was just like, those were the building blocks that you needed. And then it was just a question of like, how do you build an all new creator platform using this like technology where the user experience right now is trash, right? I think over the last few years, we've seen a lot of that. There's a company I'm doing some consulting for right now called Zora that basically is like exploring that world, like creating a YouTube alternative that is built on the blockchain where monetization is not just like ad driven, but it's also like I'm able to go and like collect somebody's video, and like maybe there's only I got one of 500 editions of this video in the same way that I'm able to collect like a trading card, right? And for my favorite creators, that's really cool, because if that creator, you know, becomes very, very popular, I could say, oh, I got a 1 of 500 edition of Mr. Beast's first video or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And if that doesn't happen, it's just like, you know, I got to support a creator directly without fees going to one of these big corporations that, like, I don't want them to have my money anyway.
So what I'm hearing is I need to put my podcast videos on this Zora platform.
Yeah. Like, I mean, again, like, the UX still needs to catch up. Like, do a lot of people have crypto wallets so that they can collect? No. Do people even understand what I'm talking about right now? And no, right? But Zora right now, one of the projects that we're working on is you can collect without having a crypto wallet, right? Like, you sign up with your email, you collect, everything happens on the back end. And then once you understand, oh, wait, like, I have an NFT of this video, you can claim your wallet and like get full control of it. And, you know, now all of those opportunities are unlocked for you. But if you just want to support a creator and watch the video, you could also do that.
So if I'm an individual and I buy a NFT of the video, do then the views that are generated, that the people that are just watching, do I get a slice of the earnings of that? Is that how that works?
If the creator sets it up that way, yes. So by default, no. By default, you're just getting a collectible version of that video. You can assume, like, you can consider it like I am tipping the creator. He is giving me an autograph in return. And if this creator becomes famous in the future, like, I could sell that autograph later, right? But you could also set it up where, you know, I am tipping the creator, or I am investing in this creator's video. This creator then posted on YouTube. He sets it up on the back end so that the YouTube ad revenue is automatically split between all of the collectors, and then I receive a portion of the proceeds. Like, that's possible today, but again, very few people are doing it given the UX and like the understanding of what's happening there. There's also like legal implications of like, okay, is this considered a security, and am I actually allowed to do that? But it's possible, and I think we're getting closer and closer to a user experience that is like widely applicable. There are musicians that I've met. You know Flume?
Flume, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So there's like a Flume song that is collectible on Zora right now, and like I think people who collected one of the first like 500 editions of it, I think it was $10 a piece that they collected it for, and you can now sell that song for like $150, like that version of it. But from the creator's perspective, it's just like if Drake dropped an NFT of like God's Plan right now, I would collect the hell out of that for no other reason than like I'm not speculating on it. I just want, in the same way that I want merch, I want that, right? So that's sort of like the world that I'm playing in right now. And it goes back to this conversation previously of like, when you have an abundance of media on the internet, nothing is valuable unless it is handmade. So how do you like verify that something is handmade, or like that there's provenance there, that I want to pay for this versus that? And I think like this is the world where like all of that starts to make sense, where, you know, there's a lot of podcasts in the world. There's a lot of, you know, conversations happening. But if I like want to support Zain, I can collect the Zain Battla podcast. And there's a lot of, you know, opportunity that you can create on top of that.
It seems that there's a lot of legitimacy behind it with the blockchain involved, with, you know, if I buy a NFT, then there's legitimacy saying that I own this NFT. I think the toughest part of the buy-in, especially for the older crowd, is that because it's not something physical or tangible I can hold in my hand. Because if I start selling t-shirts tomorrow and someone buys a t-shirt for however much, right? They can say, hey, I physically have this t-shirt, I can wear it. But if they buy a NFT of the podcast, then they say, what value does this bring to me other than this online source saying that, hey, I own this 1 out of 500 copy of the podcast.
And that's why I think it becomes a lot like there's a generational shift. Like I don't think the 40 and up crowd is really going to buy into this narrative outside of like, oh, I can make some money off of it. Like it's stupid, but let me do it. But it's the kids who like are growing up on Roblox, are growing up on Fortnite, have like a deep understanding of like the digital world is just as valuable as the physical world as far as like the time that we're spending on it. Like you can imagine a world where like I collect an edition of the Zain Battla podcast. I'm like really going out here now, but like there's a Roblox room where like you're doing like a live podcast and people are pulling up in Roblox to watch your podcast, but you can only get in if you collected an edition before, right? Like because that's all on the blockchain, like it's all interoperable. I can use that across all of these platforms, all of these games, all of these worlds, right? That's a really like, you could say like gamey or childish example, but it's like, my point is that as the digital world becomes more and more legitimate and we have all of these people who have grown up thinking it is legitimate, there's no reason that like me collecting an edition of your podcast is any less cool and like any less of a flex than me buying a t-shirt from you, right?
It further legitimizes, I guess, the point I made earlier of AI, virtual reality, and crypto. Those three worlds, they're not mutually exclusive. They're working all together because you're going to be in virtual reality, collecting NFTs from the blockchain, probably having some implementation of AI within this new reality. But there also comes back to our earlier points of, is this really where we're headed as a civilization, as a society? That as things get worse and worse around us, I honestly think that companies like Apple, companies like Google, they're hoping that the world around us continues to worsen. So people are just more glued to their technology, to their phones. I'm sure Facebook, Twitter, Instagram right now with, you know, what's happening in Gaza, they're definitely like oh yeah, we're going to censor your content, but we still want you to be glued to your phone using our devices so we can get more information on you and sell that data or show you ads. So it's almost like these technology companies are hoping that you stick to virtual reality, you get more push towards AI, and the world around you, the physical world, let that continue to deteriorate.
I think I'm more hopeful for like this blurring between like physical and digital worlds. Like it's just technology is getting better and we're able to use it no matter where we are and what we're doing. I was working with this VC fund that was investing in like digital fashion, and they called it phygital fashion, like physical digital. Um, and the example that they gave is there's this company called IYK that basically makes clothes. They're really, really cool, but every like piece of clothing has like a very small chip in it, and that chip can be scanned like what's that called? Like Apple Pay.
QR code or
Not QR code, but you know what I'm saying. Like
I know what you're saying.
NFC, the
Oh,
NFC
yes,
chip.
yes.
So you hold your phone up to it, and then it opens up like a digital version of the piece of clothing that you're holding. So you can imagine like I buy a T-shirt at a Drake concert. I like meet Drake. Drake like digitally signs that T-shirt. Now I have like this Drake NFT that I'm able to bring with me into, you know, this game that I'm playing 2K, and it's like, oh, where'd you get that shirt from on my player? Oh, well, I went to the Drake concert and I got like there's a digital mirror of the physical thing that I purchased. Like that's a world that you could just like start to play in, right? Where like you didn't have those digital property rights prior to 5 years ago, and now you do. How do you begin to connect like the physical and the digital world? So it's not like, oh, I'm fully immersed in this like metaverse experience and ignoring the physical world, but there's a link between the two so that like it's a seamless experience no matter what I'm doing and how I'm interacting.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because I think that even with social media, the way it is right now, obviously we're not immersed in virtual reality, but how do you find out updates of people or what they're doing? It's through social media most of the time. Before it was word of mouth, but now it's, oh, we realize that this reality that's happening on social media and the real physical world, they're intertwined in a way that what happened on social media, you're still this, what you said on social media, it's the same person that you are in real life, and they're the same individual.
Yeah.
So it's good to see that, you know, there's still that hope that, oh, maybe these technology companies want you to be as immersed in their technology as possible, but there are other companies like the one you just mentioned that are making efforts to continue that separation of, hey, we want you to have a physical reality and a digital reality, but still not make it to the point where you're just solely focused on one. Because I think another interesting thing is if there are these few people who boycott essentially the digital reality, then they're going to essentially just be in the physical world while everybody else is in the digital world. And is that even ideal for them? Because they're going to be missing out on what's happening currently in our reality.
Right, exactly. And I think like there's certain companies, I mean, I think even in Apple's design of the Vision Pro, right? Like if you look at the demo videos, they're arguing for this world where like I could have the headset on so that I can get the full capabilities of what's possible then, but also I'm seeing the real world with like these other things embedded on top of it. And then you can go to like an immersive version of the experience too. But like, I think even the hope there is that we're not in this fully digital world. We're just augmenting the experience that we have in the real world. There's this other company, it's this Muslim guy actually that left Apple and started this company called Humane. And they had like the AI pin. I don't know if you saw that recently. But it's basically supposed to be like a phone alternative where you like put the pin on your shirt or on your jacket or whatever it is. And you could talk to the pin and like it'll just do whatever it is that you want, answer any questions that you want. It's all AI powered. But then also if you need like a screen, you could just snap your fingers and go like this and it'll like project onto your hand, right? And then you can go like this with your hands. I don't know exactly what the gestures are, but like this is touch instead of like touching a screen, right? Very early version of like what the future might be, but I do think we're hitting this world of like, we recognize that people don't want to be staring at a screen all day. We also recognize that like digital has massive benefits that could be introduced to our lifestyle on a day-to-day basis. How do we blend the two and make it like a very seamless experience, like in our day-to-day lives?
I feel that I learned a lot today about AI and the digital world, crypto. So I do see a revolving theme, and maybe to kind of end things off is in a lot of your examples, you related things to Drake quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And you also claim to be the #1 Drake fan.
I mean, like Spotify Wrapped said I was 0.05%, but like I think I'm #1.
You think you're #1?
I don't think it goes lower than 0.05%.
What's this fascination and love with Drake?
I think if I'm actually going to answer this question like legitimately, I think Drake, if you were only going to listen to one artist for the rest of your life, I think you would be hard pressed not to answer Drake, because no matter what type of music you like, there is a Drake song for it. Arguably, there's a Drake album for it, right? He sings, he raps, there's, you know, hardcore hip hop, there's Afro beats, there's like dance music, there's R&B. Like Drake's discography is the most diverse, I would argue, of any artist active today.
I'm waiting for Drake to drop a hard rock or a country album. So until he does that, then you can say
I think we'll get there.
We'll get on the way.
I think a Drake Morgan Wallen collab coming soon.
Probably Drake, Morgan Wallen, and then another one. A lot of people, have you heard of this group called Baby Metal?
Yeah.
Drake Baby
Metal.
Like I am envisioning in the future there's gonna be a Drake Baby Metal collab.
All right,
I'm envisioning.
I'll quote you on it.
All right.
Thank you, Zain. Appreciate you. Thank you for having me on.